There are two phrases that I remember from the Wrath of the Lich King era of World of Warcraft, and I kinda hate them both. Wrath of the Lich King was the expansion where casuals finally won, Wrath babies, and tell them only that the Lich King is dead, and the World of Warcraft died with him. Let's talk about how Wrath of the Lich King changed World of Warcraft. The lead up from the end of the Burning Crusade to Wrath was quite a long cycle, with the final major content patch of TBC being March 25th, 2008, and Wrath releasing November 13th, 2008. That's about 8 months if you're wondering. 8 months of the Isle of Quel'Danas, Sunwell and Magister's Terrace, which meant raiders had a whole lot of time to bash their heads against the difficulty curve of the Sunwell raid. Once again, Blizzard had done a nax. The last raid shot up how hard it was, making very few players able to see their way fully through. Blizzard even time-gated the last 3 bosses to release a few weeks apart. Perhaps they wanted to live assess how people performed on the first 3, perhaps they didn't want a major lore character like Kil'jaeden to be slapped down in a matter of days, which is what happened regardless actually. He became available on the 20th and was beat on the 25th of May. Either way, hard final tiers seemed to be the go-to. It was going to be 8 months till the next expansion, right? But it was too hard. Burnout, tiring of wiping on the same boss week after week, no progress. It caused a lot of guilds just to go into hibernation until next expansion was announced. Blizzard would struggle to hit that balance for raiding between fun, accessibility and difficulty for the entire expansion, as we'll talk about more later. But back to the release now. Leak season was in full swing, as had become the tradition pre any expansion. Speculation of what will come next was ripe as ever. Just where are we going to be going now? And it was late. Just straight up. The whole thing basically. Yeah, this was on the 1st of August too. Blizzard didn't do their own official announcement until September 15th. However, Blizzard had a little something extra that we didn't manage to find out through our little content leak. The second Scourge invasion and the zombie infestation. One of the most utterly chaotic events to ever happen in WoW's history. Probably not the best time to be talking about this, but we're going to do it anyway. This was the hype to end all hype for expansions. The Lich King was making an entrance into the game, and whether you were level 1 or 70, there was no escaping the Lich King's minions. Let me tell you how it all went down. Day 1. October 23rd. Conspicuous crates start to appear in Booty Bay, infecting players who come into contact with them. If after 10 minutes you aren't dispelled, you become a zombie and can spread the disease yourself and you. Argent healers begin to appear to fight the zombies and dispel the disease, as can other players. Day 2, October 24th. The crates now appear in major cities. Plagued roaches roam the streets. Killing them leaves a disease cloud that further infects players. The disease now only lasts 5 minutes, down from 10. The infection itself is becoming harder to dispel, needing numerous casts. The tide of the Scourge is beginning to take hold. Day 3. October 25th. Mindless plagued NPCs roam lower level zones, attacking anything at random. The infection wasn't just targeting major cities, it was also reaching out to the rural areas. It was becoming clear that Azeroth was not prepared and that nowhere was safe. At 9 PM server time on October 25th, still day 3, all hell broke loose. Everything up to this point was just a warm-up. Now the real invasion begins. More Argent NPCs are added to major cities to fight back the Scourge, but their numbers only end up bolstering the forces of the enemy. Guards are turned to zombies after 1 minute of infection. Players are turned after 2 minutes. Argent healers are less common in major cities. The looming necropolis of the Scourge hang overhead, further spreading plague and destruction throughout the lands. More plague vermin and roaches infest main cities. At this point, Azeroth was on the brink. The tables had to be turned. Day 4, October 26th. Things, however, were going to get worse before they got better. How worse? Much worse. Players were turned into zombies after 1 minute. Argent healers had completely gone. The disease often needed 5 or 6 casts to successfully dispel. Plague vermin now infected guards, and players receive a whisper from a frozen shade telling them to give up all hope of fighting. At this point, the Scourge has complete control. Major cities are a no-go zone. Every NPC is a zombie, and if they aren't a zombie, they will be in about 1 minute. Players chase each other madly through the streets. Chaos reigns as the master plan of the Lich King consumes Azeroth. And then the next day a cure was found and it went away. Cool. This event was meant to go on for a few weeks, but you know, people complained and Blizzard acted. It was fun while it lasted, but I can't level, I can't buy consumables for raiding, the usual stuff. Perhaps the infection was a bit too effective, but you know what it did? It put the Scourge on the big screen. You could physically not play the game and failed to understand that something huge was going down. This event had such a legacy attached to it, and for good reason. It introduced us to one of the most powerful and influential beings ever to have existed in the game. The big bad guy on the box to end all big bad guys on the box. Arthas Menethil, the Lich King. Omnipotent and omnipresent. In expansions to come, Blizzard would try and replicate this main enemy, but it just didn't work, and Deathwing, well, we'll talk about that when we get to it. Knowing from day one of the expansion who the main focus is, had us hooked from the get-go. This was a character steeped in lore from the Warcraft RTS games, and you hardly had to be a lore nerd to think this guy was seriously cool. He appeared all over the place, questing, dungeons, raids. The commander of the Scourge was a constant threat, and the whole expansion built up to finally assaulting him in his frozen citadel. A whole raid tier was dedicated in a massive build-up to the assault on Icecrown. Since when do we get a raid, at least lore-wise, that is purely to prepare for a bigger raid? It was insane, and it all ended as expected. The whole payoff was fantastic, though it may have left some of us feeling a bit like Maiev after Illidan was defeated at the Black Temple, reaching the top of that mountain and asking, what now? What happens next? But you know what else the Lich King brought into the game? Death Knights, the first new class addition to World of Warcraft, the hero class, with their own starting zone, seeing how we break free of the Lich King's grasp and forge our own journey. That walk the first time for your capital booed, spat on, shamed, only to be granted clemency at your faction leader. Starting at level 55 and bombarded with abilities and talents, it was so easy to like the Death Knight. From the story-driven start, you were a warrior of death. You spread disease and pestilence at every step. Every single angst-ridden, edgy teen must have been over the moon about the thought of getting their hands on this beast of a class. I still remember Hellfire Peninsula day one doing a slash-who and seeing all the names: DK Arthas Death, Death and DK, Arthas Killer X, DK Plague Arthas Menethil, Arthas DK Plague X. Good times. And aside from the class fantasy, Death Knights themselves were absolute monsters. There has never been a more insanely overpowered class compared to the state Death Knights were in on release. Now, Death Knights were designed with the idea that each specialization should be able to tank or DPS, and it turns out when you do that, each spec by default needs adequate support from your baseline spells in addition to talents to be actually functional at doing those things. This meant the Death Knight toolkit was so well rounded and lacking in weaknesses that they were quite literally unstoppable. Oh, and they were also vastly overtuned damage wise as well. Hero class, remember? Let's cover just a few of the more iconic spells as they were on release. Chains of Ice, cost 1 Frost Rune, 100% slow, degrading over 10 seconds. 100%. It was spammable. It had a 20 yards range. Icebound Fortitude, breaks all stuns and makes you immune to them. 50% damage reduction, 12-second duration, 1 minute cooldown. Anti-magic shield prevented all magical damage for its duration, completely uncapped, and it prevented the application of additional magical effects. And then we have some talents like Lichborn, 2 minute cooldown, become undead for 10 seconds, becoming immune to charm, fear and sleep effects. This is basically a better version of Will of the Forsaken. You could also heal yourself with Death Coil during this, which was a really fun interaction. I like that a lot. Anti-magic zone, 2 minute cooldown, AoE area, reducing spell damage by 75%. Glyph of Death and Decay, this one didn't last long. Gave it a chance to horrify enemies in it for 2 seconds. It could repeatedly proc as an AoE ground effect. Get a load of this. The best bits have to be Raise Ally and the Shadow of Death. Let's say you're doing a 2v2 arena, okay? You're versus a Death Knight and a Druid. If you kill the Death Knight first, he gets to resurrect with Shadow of Death and keep fighting for 45 seconds. Actually still doing good damage, by the way. If you kill the Druid, the Death Knight can res him too. He gets to be a ghoul for 5 minutes. By the way, did you catch that I said in arena? Yes, you could do this in arena. It was insanely broken. Most of the crazy stuff didn't stick around for too long though and was patched out, but even by the end of the expansion, Death Knights was still very strong. Just in less of a I'm gonna crush you in a 1v1 whilst being 10 levels lower than you kind of way. Enough about Death Knights though, we've only touched the surface of what this expansion offered. Let's check out the leveling experience. The expansion launch was pretty seamless overall. Blizzard learned their lesson from the Burning Crusade and gave players a choice whether to level in 2 different zones, both of which were at either end of the continent of Northrend, those being the Borean Tundra and the Howling Fjord. I'm just gonna say it, one of these choices is better than the other, you know which. Wrath questing was a step up from the Burning Crusade in certain ways. By and large, it was similarly formatted, quest hubs, numerous dungeon quests, the usual really. What was built upon in Wrath the Lich King for each zone was having a story that unfolded as you quest throughout it. This was a thing for certain quest hubs in TBC, but in Wrath the Lich King it was more fleshed out. The quest line around the Blue Drakes and Cold Dara Detta in the Borean Tundra, the whole questline in Zul'gurub, taking Drakuru from being a prisoner to a champion of the Lich King, following along the Sons of Hodir and the Storm Giants in the Storm Peaks, and just the endgame questing in Icecrown, it was really good. And the world around us looked good too. You may say that some bits are a bit flat and bland, boring tundra anyone? Dragonblight perhaps? It's supposed to be a frozen wasteland for the most part, isn't it? That's kind of what a tundra is, by the way. It wasn't all white and flat though. Sholazar Basin and the hunt for the elusive the cat thing, you know the one. Grizzly Hills with its colossal fallen trees, the Worgen Fret, and the shout out to the distant Shadowfang Keep and Aragol. The Jewel in the Sky Dalaran serving as our new main hub. The Storm Peaks. I could go on and on about this zone, but Wrath of the Lich King used flying to its advantage here. This zone was designed to be hit at a higher level once you had the chance to unlock flying, and it was used in one of the most majestic and grand zones ever. This place is just fantastic. It looks fantastic, the soundtrack's fantastic. In fact, the soundtrack for Wrath of the Lich King as a whole is 10 out of 10. It's truly exceptional. You'll have heard it before, and I'm sure I'm going to echo it. The art and music teams are often the carries for World of Warcraft, as was the case here. In fact, the only real criticism I have is that Crystal Song Forest wasn't used a bit more frequently for questing, or just content in general beyond just picking carrots for that cooking daily. And our classes started hitting some crazy power spikes as we entered the later levels of Wrath of the Lich King. Let's cover the new bits before we look at the classes though. There were factors coming into the game which further pushed the power level of our characters. Just like the Burning Crusade, Wrath brought a new profession and new stats. The profession was Inscription. In Wrath, your glyphs mattered an enormous amount. In World of Warcraft, eventually they tried to phase out glyphs as something that were necessary, and eventually just made them small cosmetic effects. But the amount of glyphs that boosted your abilities considerably was huge. I could pick from a massive selection here, but just to give you a few ideas, we've got glyphs like Healing Stream Totem, Arcane Power, Starfire, Sprint, Death Grip, and so on. Glyphs mattered. On top of this, the Darkmoon cards from previous iterations of the game became linked with this profession, no longer just standalone drops you receive in the world. Stats that had existed in various forms of the game were made into more common occurrences, those being spell penetration and armor penetration, so much more common that you could really stack them on your gear. These would reduce either magical resistance or the armor of your target respectively, and were found on gear, gems, weapons, trinkets, talents, and so on. And stacking this stat did end up getting a little bit crazy towards the end of the expansion, where it was so readily available from so many sources. Having a decked out warrior casually bashing away as if you were wearing leather instead of plate didn't feel great on the receiving end. With that out of the way, let's talk classes. It was good. It was real good. Rotation started to get a bit more involved. Players' skill started to matter more and more in performing DPS wise, or in any role for that matter, and the new abilities that we got were some of the most memorable and core abilities ever to have been introduced. In fact, Wrath of the Lich King was the final expansion where talents would work under the one level equals 1 talent point system. It was done away with later on, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more when we cover Cataclysm and beyond, but even though Blizzard found space to add more spells, these weren't bad, useless or forgettable spells by and large. Baseline, Shaman received Lava Burst, Hunter got Disengaged, which is one of my favourite abilities ever, Warriors got Heroic Leap. Talent wise, we got new spells like Divine Storm for Rep Pallies, Blade Storm for Arms Warriors, Deep Freeze for Frost Mages, Penance for Disc Priests, Starfall for Balance Druids. If in the Burning Crusade classes started moving away from being memes, in Wrath of the Lich King, those same classes started to crush DPS meters and rise to the top. Retribution Paladins had the final laugh as they were buffed to become insanely powerful. They were actually crazy overpowered on release. Think about calling that Balance Druid an Oomkin, not before he blasts you out the raid with their damage. The same went for Feral, who I remember being absolutely savage in Ulduar. Shadow Priest and Enhance were also solid. The DPS game started to become much more about the player solely than the class. Procs were introduced to many specializations to liven up the rotation a bit, mobility was added, interrupts were added, chances your class became just better was very high. Maybe this dissolves some sense of class uniqueness, but I don't remember a single warrior ever saying, "No, please take Heroic Leap away again, I'm just having too much fun." Wrath of the Lich King was where Blizzard started a much bigger focus on actually live tuning classes during major patches of the expansion, leading to people doing Flavor of the Month reroll. Even just thinking about this now, I haven't heard anyone say this in so long. The gearing path was so much faster and streamlined compared to previous expansions. You could get an ult ready to smash raids comparatively very quickly, and people really took advantage of that to play whatever was hitting the top of the meters from month to month. And yes, there's some criticism to be shared here, but I'll cover that later. In fact, I still have a massive amount to cover. Raids, more expansion features, PvP, as well as some of the criticisms that Wrath of the Lich King had and has looking forwards. And what I'm going to do is cover those in the next episode. This has already gone on for quite a while. I want to be able to stick to my upload goal. Hope you guys understand. So I will see you then. I do hope you enjoyed part 1 and that you'll stick around for part 2 and continue looking at how did Wrath of the Lich King change World of Warcraft. If you like what you see, give the video a like and subscribe as there's plenty more to come. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Take care. Bye.